welcome to the Libertarian Listener with me, Chris Wilkinson. And in today's show, I've got Chris Mendes of the UK's Foundation Party with me. He's been talking to me today a little bit about the party, as well as Brexit and the economy, the COVID vaccine, and Black Lives Matter. Could you run us through the Foundation Party's 12 principles and why the party has adopted them?
First of all, let me just say thank you, Chris, for inviting me tonight. It's a pleasure to rejoin you again. So these are the 12 principles of the Foundation Party, the political values, essentially, of the party that are written in our constitution. The first one being vibrant and robust democracy without subversion. And here we're basically talking about strengthening our democracy, enhancing that link between the government and the governed. So the next one we have is individual freedom and liberty as a pathway to prosperity and happiness. Seems laughable to say that, given the fact we're under lockdown, where we've had our freedom and liberty utterly suppressed for a virus with a 99% survival rate. We want to maximise individual freedom and liberty and not see it continue to be trampled on by the mainstream politicians. Number 3, we have national independence, sovereignty and self-government. It's self-explanatory. If the country is not free, then its people certainly are not. We believe in self-determination. We believe at number 4 in controlled national borders as a basis for nationhood and democracy. So it's a matter of being a citizen of somewhere as opposed to a citizen of nowhere. We believe in not having an international treaty that governs at least half of our immigration policy because it's not the definition of a nation. Without borders, you're not really a nation. Number 5, absolute freedom of speech and tolerance of views we do not approve. Freedom of speech is important for 2 reasons. It's not just about protecting the rights of the individual. It's about ensuring that everybody else is free to hear what is being said and to make up their own mind. Yeah. This is the point that's often missed. Number 6, equal opportunity and judging people on individuality and not group identity. This is a huge issue, which we've seen in the news quite recently, actually, where with the so-called Black Lives Matter movement, we want equal opportunity for everybody in society. However, much of their campaign, perhaps we'll talk about this at length a little bit later, but much of their campaign, much of their rhetoric is actually about maintaining those sort of racial divisions, maintaining and amplifying grievances, exaggerating them to a large extent, inventing new ones, maintaining those divisions. And where we do live in a world eventually where everybody is guilty of a crime, of a collective crime, purely because you're white, for example, and you should have extra privileges if you're another race. It's completely the opposite of the sort of classical liberal freedom and liberty for everybody, regardless of race, and that is it's a real issue. Number 7, skepticism of power and a preference for free choice. So this is the government will often say that it's doing something that's in our best interest. Well, of course, that's what it always says. Actually, no, it's not always the case. It's either in the interest of a particular group and not another, or it's in their own self-interest, very often the case. We want government, we want politicians to make less decisions for us, and we want people to make their own decisions and to run their lives on their own time, on their own terms. Number 7. Number 8, free market capitalism, free enterprise and free trade. Self-explanatory, especially for our listeners. But essentially, we believe, again, it should rhyme with every other value that I've spoken of so far, that we again believe that we think governments should intervene less and less and less in our markets, in our businesses, and allow people to get on and run their business in the way they need to. There are cases where government has a role to play, but far often it's picking winners. It's bailing out companies that should fail. It's erecting tariff barriers and being in favour of customs unions and so on. I mean, goodness me, Boris Johnson's got some cheek lecturing Jeremy Corbyn until recently, when Corbyn was the leader of the opposition in Parliament, about capitalism and how socialism is really bad. He had the cheek to give Corbyn that lecture. But yet the truth is that up and down this country, we have Conservative Party controlled councils purchasing shopping centres purchasing hotels and cinemas. This is happening all over the place because local Conservative councils think that they can play business using public money, a lot of borrowed money, make a complete mess. And my council in Croydon has just gone bankrupt, literally bankrupt.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons is of the ridiculous spending that it's been doing. So there's not much defence for free markets really in the mainstream of politics, despite what they pretend to believe. Number 9, limited government, low borrowing and fiscal discipline. Again, look, every household has to live within its means. We need more of that attitude at the top of our society. Number 10, local autonomy, strong local government and meaningful local democracy. We are a party that believes that politics starts on our doorstep. It's about strong local communities. And we actually want to see a massive devolvement of power, not just from Brussels to Westminster, which is what we voted for, but from Westminster down to local communities. Yeah. Now, number 11, rule of law with robust and depoliticized policing and criminal justice. There was an excellent survey that was done by a think tank called Civitas a few years ago, entitled Who Goes to Prison? And the vast majority of the prisoners, this was a survey for the prison population in England and Wales, 2017, I believe it was. And the majority, overwhelming majority of the population of prisoners are basically serious or serial offenders. So if you commit a very serious crime, you'll go to prison, but otherwise it would take a good few goes before you go to prison. And by the time they are in prison, they're hardened criminals, and good luck rehabilitating them. So we don't want to send people to prison on a first offence, but we do want to have a much stronger deterrent in the first place. And we simply don't have it, not to mention how politicised the police and the criminal justice system is. Yeah. And don't get me started on police officers bending the knee, for goodness sake, and taking part in gay pride parades and doing the YMCA nonsense. This is not what the people expect from their police. Finally, number 12, strong national defence and a special loyalty to our armed forces. I speak as an ex-army reservist in the territorial army, but generally speaking, yes, it's one of our very conservative values, where we believe that one of the strong roles for government is to defend the nation, and we want a strong armed forces. David Cameron, so-called Conservative Prime Minister, obviously slashed the armed forces budget. And when I was a reservist, our Royal Signal Regiment was merged with another. I saw some of the changes that those budget cuts had, and an awful lot of rearrangement and cuts were made at a time when we've still got deployments around the world. It's absolutely crazy. So you never know what tomorrow's going to look like. So that's the end of the list. Again, sorry, it was a long answer to a short question, but those are the 12 political values that that's what the party stands for, that, as I say, are enshrined in our constitution.
As the Foundation Party is quite uniquely placed, having had a number of its representatives elected as councillors, what can the Foundation Party provide by means of advice and campaigning experience for people looking to stand for election?
Well, it's a big topic. It's a very interesting one as well, and it's obviously what we're in the business for. In the end, it's to represent a body of opinion. It is to produce some concrete answers for how we might change society, specific changes to make people's lives better. We've had some success. You're absolutely right. We've had a mixed result, very much a mixed set of results in the very early days of our party. We're a young party. In the May elections of 2019, one of the biggest victories we had was electing Foundation Party councillor in Clacton. It was a three-horse race between the Conservatives, Liberal Democrats and the Foundation Party. And we worked very hard. We had the right message, and we did a lot of work on the ground. And we got exactly the same number of votes as the Tories and the Lib Dems combined. And we came first, and we smashed them both. And they were wondering on the count night at the counting centre, who on earth are these people? What are they doing here? You got to have a clear message, and you got to put that on your leaflet. There's no point printing out a leaflet with 500 words on it and telling them all about you. It's a clear message. What do you stand for? What change are you going to bring about? And why should people vote for you? And the clearer that is, the better. The bottom line is, whoever can frame the debate at an election in terms of vote for us and you get this, vote for them, you get something else. If you can frame the argument, frame the discussion, that then people start thinking about it in the terms that you have set out, that party usually wins. And there's lots of things you have to take in consideration. In May 2019, where we had that success, Well, Brexit was very much an open wound. And so it was a local election, but we made it clear that we were the pro-Brexit option. And if you want to give Theresa May a bloody nose, then we were the ones to vote for. But at the same time, we also offered the right messages and the right policies and the right things that we would vote for and help bring about at a local level with regards to speeding limits in the local area, whether it was to do with housing developments housing developments in places of natural beauty, which people weren't happy with. There's lots of serious issues locally. So it's about being in touch with those issues.
So since a major policy review has been undertaken at this time within the party, what future ambitions do you have for the Foundation Party?
So we're hoping to make a couple of announcements it'd be early into the next year, and a few months from now, we're looking to come out with essentially a new manifesto, which we need to renew. There is going to be a huge emphasis on tax and money and the economy. We live our own lives on our own terms. We make our own choices. We get things the way we want, when we want. But the one industry that is so 20th century, that is so stubborn and so lethargic, is politics and government. Yeah. It's so last century. It really is. Public services, the meddling in our lives for businesses. We're under lockdown. We have a virus. There's not actually much you can do when a virus like this comes to the country, except protect the vulnerable and encourage a vaccine. But they have to meddle, don't they? They have to shut down things. They have to put bits of sticky tape over the park benches because we have to be treated like children. So we want to have a policy platform that devolves power and decision-making down to individuals and families. That's what we're really about. And the policy platform that we produce will translate some of that into action. But the point I was just alluding to was about money and taxes, because it's hugely important. At the end of the day, if we are going to succeed in getting politicians out of our lives and getting them focused on the things that they should be focused on, things like policing, law and order, the courts, things like defending the nation, things like the environment, instances where we feel that there is absolutely a role for government to play their part, to achieve collectively what we cannot individually. But if we want them to focus more on that and less on meddling with our lives and taking decisions and doing things that we don't need them to, then perhaps the way to do it is to keep more of our own money in taxation and keep it away from them. The less money they have to play with, the less of it they will waste. Yeah. So I think a large part of our policy platform and our emphasis going forward politically, to be honest, is going to be on lowering taxes. It's going to be allowing individuals and families, giving them a break. We're already one of the heaviest tax countries in the world. Giving people a break, spend their own money on their own priorities, that politicians waste less money and focus on things that they should. I think you'll find that the policy manifesto that we announce in a couple of months' time will very much reflect those things along those very lines.
Right, so this section is on Brexit and the economy. And the EU has been demanding 10 more years of access to the UK fishing waters, but there's also an overtone coming through of an anti-free market 1930s style protectionism creeping into the EU's rhetoric. I've got a quote from The Guardian here that says, in an unwelcome development for Boris Johnson, France and Germany have instructed the EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, that they are united on the need for the UK to face consequences over future divergence from the EU rulebook as policy changes. The EU is proposing that it should have the power to unilaterally hit British exports with tariffs in the event that Whitehall fails to follow Brussels' upgrades to its regulations. UK sources said that the negotiations would collapse unless that demand was dropped within the next 48 hours. British negotiators are instead offering to review the deal in an unspecified number of years to allow the terms of trade to be changed if there is significant divergence. Now, surely we won't have true sovereignty if we can't control our waters or our borders, which is exactly what the people voted for back in 2016. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I cannot agree more, absolutely. I think polls since the referendum, incidentally, clearly show, as we all know, that the number one reason for voting to leave the European Union was sovereignty, self-government and determination. And anything that violates that is unacceptable. It's as simple as that. And now the truth is that our fishing industry, and James O'Brien, I was listening to, not by choice, somebody else had it on in the house, LBC breakfast, and he was belittling the UK fishing industry. Yes, they're always on our side, aren't they? The British side. They're never, they take the EU side every time. Honestly, James O'Brien talking about the small size of the fishing industry, and it's perfectly correct. It is a very small size of GDP and our economy. But some things are more important than the material. And this is about our country. This is about governing ourselves. This is about determining our own rules about our own resources over our own industries. We should only govern the big parts of the economy, and the small parts of the economy we should let Brussels run. What kind of nonsense is this? But the bottom line is this: is that the European Union wants to keep us as closely aligned to their rule book as possible. Why? Yeah. Because it means that we are then less competitive, we are less mobile, we are less able to strike new agreements. Because how the hell are you going to strike a new free trade agreement with another country when you turn around to them and say, actually, everything's got to coincide with the European Union regulation? So you lose all of your negotiation sort of power there. It's an anti-competition. It's a move against us because they see us as rivals, and rightly so. So we've got to hold firm, and we've got to be in complete sovereign control of our own industries, of our own markets, and of our own resources, and nothing less is acceptable.
Are the EU even in a position to make such outrageous demands and threats of tariffs, considering the EU itself represents a shrinking proportion of global trade and represents everything that is against competition? And surely if they didn't want us to leave in the first place, which they've made us known to be true, and would pretty much stop at nothing to get us back inside, surely a tax on our country of any sort, whether it be economic sanctions or otherwise, would just simply push us further away.
I agree. I don't think they are in a position to demand. I think it is all bluster at the end of the day. Yes, it would push us away, as you suggest. And also, at the end of the day, if they want to impose tariffs on our goods, tariffs are self-harming at the end of the day. Yeah. They hurt the consumer that's buying those goods that will come into their country from ours. The way of the world today is towards free trade. Countries around the world understand the value of free trade, and that's why we have struck the one bit of good. I won't get many popularity points for this, but I'm going to give the government credit. It's doing everything abysmally right now, except it is doing a good job of signing free trade agreements with a lot of countries right now, and it's up to 38 or something, Egypt being the latest. They're continuity agreements, some of them. But I have to say I'm very pleased with that. I really am. One of my favourite arguments in favour of free trade, I was reading it again the other day, that hopefully our listeners will be interested in, by an economist, an American economist, Henry George. He said brilliantly, protectionism is doing to your own people during times of peace what your enemies would do to you during times of war.
Yeah.
Which I thought is just an extraordinary way to put your finger on it, really. Free trade is a mutually beneficial arrangement, and the European Union is in the last century. It really is. It wants to have, so we know about the European Union, its obsession with protectionism, and it is not the way the world is going. It's a shrinking part of the world economy, as you say, and we need to get out, we need to get back control of all of our country and our resources and our markets. I mean, to crack on with free trade arrangements all around the world. And if the EU wants to do a deal and have free trade with us, great, we're interested. If not, good luck to you, and we're going to crack on without you. No country in the end becomes poorer as a result of becoming more self-governing. It's as simple as that. That's what history shows us.
Yeah.
We'll be fine. In fact, we'll be more than fine. We'll do very, very well, regardless of these sham negotiations with the EU.
So over the past week, we've heard that both the Arcadia Group, which owns retail outlets like Topshop, Burton Wallace, Dorothy Perkins, has gone into administration, and Debenhams, which I conveniently work for, has failed to find a buyer as it entered administration in April. In all, over 25,000 high street jobs are at risk. I've got a quote from BBC News here that says, Arcadia boss Ian Grabiner said, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, including the forced closure of our stores for prolonged periods, has severely impacted on trading across all of our brands. Throughout this immensely challenging time, our priority has been to protect jobs and preserve the financial stability of the group, in the hope that we could ride out the pandemic and come out fighting on the other side. Ultimately, however, in the face of the most difficult trading conditions we have ever experienced, the obstacles we encountered were far too severe. Now, naturally, you could expect Brexit or COVID to be blamed for the financial issues faced by the high street at the moment. But isn't it the case that businesses are going bust, as Mr. Grosvenor said there, because of high taxation, excessive regulations, and a rapidly shrinking and frankly castrated private sector that's been brought on by financially damaging social distancing and lockdown measures implemented by the government?
Yes, I mean, I think for lockdown, goodness me, the damage that it is doing, I don't think we have had, and this is largely thanks to the lack of institutional opposition to lockdown that hasn't granted us the chance to really discuss and explore the cost of lockdown, and the mainstream media going along with it, and everybody being scared out of their wits. We are going to realise the damage that the government has caused, which is going to be far worse than the virus. Absolutely, it really will. We're going to pay for it for some time as well. We really will. Some businesses, jobs are going with little sign of them returning. Companies are going under. I mean, Debenhams, goodness me. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I thought I knew that Debenhams was an old company. I didn't realise until the other day it was actually founded in 1778. I would have guessed 1878, not 1778. So some of our oldest companies are going under. You know, there's lots of small businesses that are really struggling, lots of family-run businesses, lots of pubs and restaurants, the service industry that is in real dire struggles at the moment. Sporting and leisure centres, I don't think some of them will be up and running. If not, they won't necessarily close right now, like Debenhams unfortunately looks like it will. But it might be 6 months from now, 12 months from now, 18 months from now, because they were just never able to recover. No doubt poverty has gone up, hunger has gone up, mental health issues have gone up. You know, this is a very serious issue. Some of these things are going to be easy to measure, some things less so. But lockdown is one of the most disgraceful government decisions, policies that we have seen in the last century. I think it is the most disgusting instances of self-mutilation that I've ever seen a government ever do. And I'm absolutely disgusted, and I think more and more people are too.
So this next section's on the COVID vaccine, and of course, the rollout for the vaccine will begin this week. I've got a quote from the Mirror that says, the vaccine will be administered at dozens of hospital hubs from Tuesday, that's tomorrow, with people aged 80 and over, care home workers and NHS workers who are at higher risk to receive the jab first. The distribution of the vaccine across the UK is being undertaken by Public Health England and the NHS in England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland through systems specially adapted from those used for the national immunisation programmes. On Sunday, the UK's chief medicine regulator said there was no doubt that the COVID vaccine approved in the UK is safe. Now, how can such assurances be made as to the safety of the vaccine when it's been developed in less than a year? Clinical trials are still underway, with findings not being presented for at least another year, and even our own dear leader Boris Johnson has expressed doubts as to whether it's safe or not.
I think those are all very reasonable questions that everybody has a right to ask, and everybody has should have the right, absolutely, to decide whether they want to have the vaccine or not. I mean, absolutely, yes. I mean, there is a Professor Sucharit Bhakdi, who's a Thai-born German national, who's been speaking against lockdown and written a book, A Corona False Alarm ? Very much from a scientific expert point of view, who basically has exercised and expressed caution about the vaccine. And he said himself, quote, that he's not mad. So, would you take the vaccine? He said no, because I'm not mad. In order to know that a vaccine is safe, you have to see that it proves to be effective and it helps to save lives. And at the moment, with 5 and 10,000 under 70-year-olds affected, it's very difficult to have a sufficient sampling, he argued, to be absolutely sure that it is effective. I have to say I'm not in a rush myself to take it. For these sorts of reasons. There's quite a funny tweet on social media from Bill Burr, the American comedian, if you're familiar with him, sarcastic so-and-so. He said, shout out to the UK for being the first to try the vaccine. It's if it goes wrong, we all die and everyone else knows not to take it. I mean, he's obviously kidding, it's tongue in cheek, but I'm not in a rush to take it myself. I'm 35. I'm not especially vulnerable to this at all. My understanding, the evidence is clear. If I get it, just like everybody else my age group, practically 99% of everybody else at my age group has got it. We're going to have mild symptoms or no symptoms at all. And there's a very worrying thought that the government is going to, in the end, have some sort of, they've mentioned that they won't go down this route, but the idea of people not having that choice and being, obligated to take it, and it might be achieved by other means. As you say, you might, some certain services or certain access to certain things might be withdrawn, and only granted on the basis that you have a certificate showing that you have it. Goodness me, if we enter that territory, we really are in trouble. So I fear, and I'm very frightened of the thought that people who genuinely don't want to have a needle in their arm to take a vaccine are going to be forced to do so. That's a horrific thought. And if that turns out to be the case, I will be out on the street. I'll be giving every tear, blood, sweat. I'll be giving everything I physically can to campaign, to protest against that. And I'm sure many, many others would do too. But let's hope that we don't get to that stage, and hopefully people ultimately at the end of the day, they have the right to choose whether they take it or not.
That's sort of tied over into the next question, actually, which is, what does the vaccine entail for our civil liberties when we've got talk of health passports, and quite literally in the case of Qantas, where if you haven't had a negative test or a COVID vaccine, you can't use these products or services that the company is providing. Do you think, resulting from that, more pro-liberty companies will rise up and sort of fill the gap in the market as people decide differently and resist being forced to take the vaccine?
I think this is a sort of a one-off. Well, it seems like a one-off situation. It's a very crisis I've not seen in my lifetime. But you do worry about whether this does sets a precedent for when we have some sort of virus, worse or not so bad next time around. Does the government then jump to lockdown? Does the government then jump to some sort of compulsory vaccine to health passports? And then at some point, if God forbid, if that becomes some sort of norm in society, then oh God, well, we're going to need some sort of there would be opposition, and it will come in a range of forms. And it's a very interesting thought that you raise, and that might very well be one of them. But I'm hoping that opposition from the people really comes to the surface very soon about the government's handling of all of this, and a lot of these measures are actually deterred from happening again. I'm hoping the Conservatives take a massive thumping at the next local elections as a point about lockdown, which, however, might be the reason why they're postponed, because of that possible outcome. We know what the government propaganda machine is capable of. We saw it in the Brexit referendum, when the civil service, Parliament, the government, everything is thrown at the kitchen sink. They throw everything at it. They get 2 leaflets rather than one that they're allowed. And they get everybody on, they dominate the media, and they scare people with their propaganda. And we've seen it with the referendum about Brexit. We see the government will only represent one side of the argument. And when they want people to take the vaccine because it's their health strategy, they will not talk about it in an objective, open, honest way. They won't talk about the disadvantages and the advantages. No, they'll tell you that you have to do it, and if you don't do it, you're going to lose this, and they're going to be, this is the way the government works. And so it's absolutely vital that everybody retains that free choice whether to take it or not.
Yeah.
They can make do their own research, find their own information, and make their own decision.
So the last section for today is on Black Lives Matter, and this week Millwall fans have been criticised by mainstream media for booing players who took to the knee in support of Black Lives Matter, which is a ritual derived from the death of career criminal George Floyd earlier this year. And I suppose comparisons can be drawn to the incident that occurred on the 14th of May 1938 when England played Germany in Berlin, and the England team were ordered to perform a Nazi salute in order to aid diplomatic relations, apparently. Though this modern rendition seems to be more so a matter of choice. What are your initial thoughts on this?
When I heard the boos, I was delighted. To be perfectly honest, I really was. I think good for them. And there's a very simple reason for that. Context is very important here, and some background statements here is very important. You take the phrase Black Lives Matter, no one disagrees with that. We are classical liberals in this room. We believe in equality of opportunity for everybody in society. We don't care about race, don't care about religion, don't care about any of those things. Honestly, we want to judge people on their individuality, not their group identity. So the phrase Black Lives Matter is entirely compatible with that. However, the organisation Black Lives Matter, capital B, capital L, capital M, is much, much more. It's very, very simple. You either understand that or you don't. Black Lives Matter is a far left, radical, Marxist organisation that wants to condemn millions of white people with the collective crime of being white. And we should feel guilty of that, and we should bend the knee, and we should basically topple statues and just rewrite history or eliminate it and forget about it. And the most stupid element of this, well, it's all stupid to be honest, but one element is this notion of defunding the police. It's an American import. All of this comes from America with a completely different historical backing and backdrop. Yes, this is an organisation that wants to rewrite history, make us feel guilty for our apparent so-called white privilege, which is a nonsense. And it wants to maintain and amplify those racial divisions rather than resolve them. And it's absolutely disgusting, disgraceful. We want liberty and freedom for everybody. We don't need to bend the knee. I don't understand what the argument's about. We agree racism is bad. What are we arguing about? Honestly, if you want to make a statement about race, for example, or racism in the country, to one degree or another, protest on the street. Stand for election. Why are we politicizing football? I'm sick of it, and so many people are sick of it. You know, to watch a football match, the reason why we watch a football match is just to tune out of our difficult lives, have a relax, and watch football and enjoy ourselves. We don't want to be subjected to a lecture on society and morality by a bunch of left-wing radicals who want to rewrite our history. But we still got the bending of the knee and all of that sort of thing, it comes from the 1960s in America, part of the US civil rights movement. And you know, when black people are getting beaten to a pulp by police officers, when you got black kids segregated from white kids in schools in America, I can sympathise a lot more with some of this very aggressive sort of rhetoric in those days. But as I say, in this country, we don't have the same. We've never had segregation in that sense. With in this country like they did in America, we don't have the same history on this subject. A lot of this is entirely imported from America, taken completely out of context, regardless, and imposed and pretend like we have institutional racism that is rife in the country. It's nonsense, and that's what the booing was. That's what they were booing. They were booing, and if they've got the freedom, incidentally, to make a political gesture to impose that on the players, then the people in the crowd have got a freedom and a right as well to oppose it. It's as simple as that. So I don't blame the players, but I do blame, again, it's the lack of institutional opposition. It's a lack of politicians with a pair of bollocks that are going to actually speak up and against this sort of thing. There's not enough of it, and that's the reason why they get away with it. And we've got a substandard and gutless political class, and that's why they're winning.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, Chris. And that's all for this week on the Libertarian Listener. Join us again next week for our final episode of the year. It'll be me, Ed, and Jason reviewing the events of 2020, a very memorable year, but not necessarily for all the right reasons. Until then, you can check us out on social media, the links to which are in the description below, and I shall see you again next week. Thanks for listening.